Erectile dysfunction? Nah, I'm way too young. Or are you? Here's the hard truth. 1 in 12 of all you young studs out there can't pitch your tent on a regular basis, and something like 1 in 9 of you guys in your prime timers struggle to raise a natural chubby. As for all you middle-aged silver foxes, well, you know exactly what it's like when you can't rouse your python from its slumber right when you need it the most. So on today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're looking at what the difference actually is between Viagra and Cialis, and if they can truly fix the issue. Erectile dysfunction, or ED, is like a bad dream when you look down at the meat gun in your hand and instead of firing bullets, out pops a limp, useless flag that says bang. We're not talking about having one drink too many and finding out you have a lame boner. That's just the booze playing havoc on your hormone levels, your blood flow, and nervous system. What we mean by ED is that your rod won't rise to attention for you and your partner's sexual satisfaction at all. It's a dud, a damp firework. You can't get it up or in on a consistent basis. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 5 says to qualify you for ED, you must have launch failure for a period of 6 months. But who's counting? Forget the manual. ED can be mild, moderate, or severe, aka why even bother? It affects about 8% of males aged 20 to 29 and 11 of you guys aged 30 to 39. After that, the curse of the deflated sausage starts getting real. It's believed that about 40% of men in their 40s will have experienced regular negative feedback from Houston by the time they hit 50. And for men over 70, nearly 3/4 of them are stuck saying those tragic words, "Sorry, it's not you, it's me." For a long time, humans didn't know what caused our erections. That great Greek and Roman physician Galen thought the stiffy was a matter of our phalluses being pumped with air. It wasn't until the Renaissance when people started talking about blood being the reason. And then in the 18th century, a guy named Albrecht von Haller from Switzerland, the so-called father of modern physiology, hit the nail square on the head when he surmised the pocket rocket had a lot to do with the nervous system. It all starts when you're getting aroused. Maybe, if you're 16, when your crotch accidentally rubs against a vibrating washing machine, or maybe you peer out into the distance and you see a fine pair of hills on the horizon. This mental or physical stimulation sends messages down to your penis, and before you know it, someone's down there saying, "Hi, pleased to meet you." And that's because those brain signals from the stimulation make blood rush into the 2 spongy columns in your John Thomas called the corpora cavernosum. So basically, when your soldier won't stand to attention, there's some kind of breakdown in this system. Your columns don't fill up at all, or your glass is half empty. The dreaded semi. This is where drugs like Cialis and Viagra ride into your bedroom like a knight in shining armor. They help you load your chambers and, if need be, reload, making sure you're not stuck with that good-for-nothing semi. In 2022, Americans alone were responsible for over 3 million Cialis prescriptions shared amongst almost 700,000 patients. That same year, Cialis had a 15.7% market share in the U.S. ED market, worth $1.1 billion, where 18% of men aged 20 and up suffer from some form of ED. Globally, the ED market was worth $2.6 billion in 2022, catering up to around 320 million customers. Market research projects that its value will double to $5.1 billion by 2032. Other sources say closer to $6.9 billion by 2034. Sildenafil, with its brand name Viagra, is even bigger. In 2022, there was more than 3.4 million prescriptions in the U.S. for around 1.1 million patients. But globally, Viagra is massive, with a 57% market share of the hard-on industry. In the UK, where about 25% of younger men report some form of ED, 7 million Viagra Connect pills were sold in 2021. It seems the only way is up for the ED drug market. So does that mean men are getting worse at manufacturing regular erections? The answer is, kind of. You're twice as likely to have ED if you're a diabetic, and the rate of diabetes has been increasing globally year over year. From 1990 to 2000, about 9% of Americans had it. From 2021 to 2023, the rate was just above 14%. In the 1970s, less than 3% of Americans ticked the box. So that's one major reason for the lack of the all-American boner. Then you have obesity, which according to scientists is a veritable chubby killer. Our bellies are getting bigger by the year, with 40% of Americans ticking the obese box in 2025. If a recent paper in Lancet is correct, by 2050 about 80% of Americans will be overweight or obese. It matters. A paper about Chinese obesity said 42% of obese men in a study had ED. A similar study in Slovakia said 73%, although that was only men over 40. Still, researchers in another study found that obese men of any age were 3 times more likely than the general population to suffer from a penis that should come with a sign out of order. Along with diabetes and obesity, the other main medical cause of ED is atherosclerosis. What that means is a buildup of plaque in your arteries, which could lead to cardiovascular disorders like a stroke or a heart attack. A 2020 study revealed that over 18 million Americans have it, but many of them don't know it. Among those who do, a significant number take blood pressure medications, which can sometimes lead occasionally to ED as a side effect. It's starting to sound like one day we'll be living in a stiffy-less reality, but as we'll now show you, there are many things you can do without taking pills that can bring back your MIA Woody. One of the major changes in a man's body as he gets older is his testosterone levels decrease, and it's testosterone that plays a big part in your libido, i.e. your sexual appetite. Obviously, if you don't feel horny, your little Richard will be more reluctant to rise. Testosterone levels in men drop on average about 1 to 2% per year after they reach 40. By the time you hit 70 or 80, those days when the washing machine caused a bulge in your sweatpants will feel like a distant memory. But you can increase your testosterone levels by eating well and exercising, and hopefully shedding a few of those extra pounds. You could also go for testosterone replacement therapy. In general, having a healthy diet and regular exercise improves mental health and testosterone levels, while stress, anxiety, and depression in general can all lead to limp zucchinis, as can drugs. Incessant smoking, excessive boozing, and a diet of cocaine, benzos, and opioids will also wreak havoc on your ability to rise to the occasion. Drugs are usually terrible for making love, and when you consider over 48 million Americans aged 12 and older had a substance use disorder in 2023, that is a lot of spluttering rockets. There are a lot of people in this world who've experienced cocaine or amphetamine-induced horniness only to discover their penis hadn't read the game plan. In fact, their penis decided to perform a magic trick and shrink before their very eyes. One of the reasons is adrenaline. Too much of that is a blood flow restrictor. Hence, a frankfurter becomes a cocktail sausage. Many illicit drugs cause blood vessels to constrict, and they all affect the nervous system, so just about all of them are a real party pooper for the penis. In general, a fitter, healthier, soberer you is great for maximizing your chubby potential. One study found that people who stopped smoking who had ED saw a 25% improvement within a year. In another study, albeit with just 104 drinkers, over 88% reported improved erectile function just 3 months after quitting alcohol. But around 10 to 20% of all cases of ED are psychological. Sometimes people feel that they won't be able to make their partner happy, and this can seriously affect your launch capabilities. We call this performance anxiety, and anywhere from 9 to 25% of men can get it. It often means firing off your load before the receptacle is even ready, what's commonly known as premature ejaculation, or ending up with a lame dud, technically referred to as a psychogenic erectile dysfunction. Low self-esteem and depression can also take the air out of your Johnson, and if you take medications for depression or anxiety, these too tend to dampen the spirit of your penis. So sometimes a person will have a disease that will stop the blood pumping into those chambers, but more often than not, simple lifestyle changes can make things right again. But if you've tried everything and it still doesn't rise, well, that's when we have Viagra and Cialis, or what's known in the Infographics Show laboratory as cheat mode. And this is how it all started. Back in 1989, pharmaceutical scientists working for Pfizer in England were working on creating a drug for high blood pressure, hypertension, and angina pectoris, or heart disease-related chest pain. The drug affected blood flow, but the scientists were certainly not thinking about limp penises in those early lab days. They only found that out after a few years of development, when they were at the stage that they could start testing it on humans in medical trials, which in this case was a bunch of hard-working Welsh coal miners. When the trial was over, the doctors asked all of them if they experienced any side effects, to which one guy put his hand up and he said, "I seem to have more erections during the night than normal." Other guys started smiling, followed by a chorus of voices saying, "So did I!" Pfizer had accidentally just cracked the code to solving the age-old problem of the non-existent stiffy. Then, they started trials on men with chronic erectile dysfunction, and soon it became obvious they were onto something. But importantly, these men needed stimulation. They were given hardcore pornography and their erections were recorded with a gadget during a week's viewing. One of the R&D guys at Pfizer later said that some of the men would not give the drug back. 75 to 80% of those impotent men experienced erections again, compared to 25% who had the placebo. And as far as drug efficacy goes, that was a huge success. It was going to change the world and make Pfizer a ton of money. By 2008, Viagra was worth $1.9 billion. As we said, there needs to be arousal. When that happens to a man, a substance called nitric oxide is released in his penis. Through a series of steps, this becomes a substance called cGMP. And it's this stuff that causes the muscles to relax, while allowing more blood flow into those empty chambers. Now, you might have seen that ED drugs are called PDE5 inhibitors. But all that means is they stop PDE5 from degrading the good stuff, the cGMP. What they won't do is give you a raging stiffy if you're not feeling aroused. Which is great news if you take Viagra and suddenly are called into an HR meeting, or are told about a death in the family. They don't make the actual blood flow into the chambers like some kind of pumping system, they just make it easier for those chambers to fill and, importantly, to keep them filled. As you'll soon see, many people who take these drugs can actually get hard, but they can't keep it hard, especially when there are position changes or minor distractions. The sex drive part, that's all down to you. The drugs are definitely not magic beans, and your beanstalk won't magically grow higher than usual. You're not going to have a magic orgasm either. It's simply all about keeping the blood in the tunnels. Let's now touch on some basics. Once you pop your Viagra, you'll be flying at 30,000 feet after 30 to 60 minutes. And if all goes well, you can look forward to 4 to 6 hours of fairly dependable chubbage. One of the downsides is that around 2 in 10 people will feel flushed and possibly get a headache. That's related to the sudden change in blood flow in your body due to the increased levels of nitric oxide. While feeling like your head just came out of the oven isn't exactly ideal before getting down to business, it's usually nothing to worry about. But take note of where you bought your Viagra. It's one of the most counterfeited drugs in the world. So if you're buying from a street stall that also sells CS gas and knuckle dusters, you might want to think twice about where it was made. Some of the counterfeit pills seized by the authorities were actually much stronger than the real deal. Overdoing it with Viagra, like taking an overdose, can lead to serious cardiovascular issues, or worse, a prolonged erection requiring professional deflation, also known as detumescence. And we don't mean popping a pin in it or thinking about your grandma. It can be dangerous and require an ER visit. The same goes for Cialis. It works the same way as Viagra, but because of a different chemical composition, it might take 30 minutes to 1 hour to start working, which isn't great if the moment's already heating up. On the flip side, once it's in action, you might score a day and a half of prime-time performance. The side effects are different with Cialis, with the biggest issue being pain in the limbs, and we don't mean your third leg. Both of those drugs are generally quite safe. But if your stiffy is still there after 4 hours and it's starting to feel painful, you should slip on your longest, baggiest t-shirt and go see a doctor. Okay, so what kind of people are taking these drugs? As we said earlier, chubby dysfunction is sometimes just a matter of aging. With younger people, their problem tends not to be physical but psychological. As a 19-year-old said online, he was so anxious about losing his virginity to his partner that he couldn't attain liftoff after many times of trying, which of course his girlfriend thought was a problem with her. So he tried Viagra to get over that first hurdle. He explained, "I got too nervous the first time I took it, so I didn't feel aroused enough to do it. But after another attempt, we were finally able to have sex. It felt amazing. I was so relieved." We'll come back to the topic of young users at the end of the video. By the time you're in your 50s or 60s, you've likely jumped over 1,000 hurdles, knocked some down, maybe even fallen flat on your face. But as summer turns into autumn, you might find those hurdles starting to get a little bit bigger. Not only do you struggle to put blood in your kielbasa, but if it eventually fills, the tiniest little distraction can cause some leakage. And this is where ED meds come in. They turn your half-hearted erection into a fairly reliable rocket. As one guy said online, "I had given up on ever getting fully hard in my early 50s, but this stuff makes me feel like a teenager again." As we said earlier, these drugs are not just for impotence. A lot of guys in their receding hairline years get stuck with semis in the bedroom, which can be like trying to thread a sock through a keyhole. A 51-year-old man said online, "My erections were semi-hard and took a lot of stimulation, but would lose erection if wife got on top. That old switch position deflation, a curse for the aged." But after 60 milligrams of Viagra, the next time his wife so much as laid a finger on his package, he was rock hard within a minute. had a 30-minute session, and after a commercial break, started again. He said the pills made him hot and flushed, so he decreased the dosage and found what he called his sweet spot. And we don't mean his wife's happy place. We had to go through a lot of reviews to find some negative ones. There was the 27-year-old who said Viagra didn't work at all for him, and despite writing on a website with hundreds of positive reviews, he said these pills were a, quote, scam. You'll soon see what might have made him feel this way. Then there was a guy who said, sure, it worked, but it wasn't worth it. He described the side effects as a blue-tinted vision lasting about 3 to 5 hours, migraine-like headaches, sensitivity to light, nausea, and lethargy. Unfortunately, experiencing one or more of these side effects is quite common. So he should have lowered the dosage, and if that didn't work, stayed away completely. One of the other negative reviews online was from a disappointed woman who said, my husband's doctor prescribed 100 milligrams of Viagra, and we paid $230 for 5 pills. It didn't work at all for him. She paid a lot of money too. While the average cost of Viagra is $91 per pill, the average for the generic ones is only about $4 a pill. Looking at reviews for Cialis, it's a similar story to Viagra. It's hard to find negative reviews. Most of them sound like this: Cialis makes you rock hard. Believe me, this is not an ad. It's true, these pills are often very effective, but for about 20 to 30% of people, they just won't work. Sometimes, the reason is simple: they're just not turned on. More often, though, it's due to a psychological issue like profound performance anxiety or depression, or an underlying medical condition, and that's when it's time to see a doctor. Some people should never take these pills because they can have scary reactions with other medicines. If you take nitroglycerin for angina or nitrate medications for heart issues, absolutely stay away from ED drugs because the mix can be lethal. And if you're young and you're taking them to get over hurdles, chill with the pills after the hard work is done and see if you can do it the au natural method. There are a lot of reports these days of young people needlessly taking ED pills for longer-lasting chubbies and becoming psychologically dependent. This means that they've ruined a perfectly good Johnson, and now they daren't leave the house without Viagra in their wallet. A recent paper said it is a rapidly growing problem. In a report from Spain, 1 in 4 Viagra users was 16 to 30, with the guy saying it was the only way that they could rise to the occasion. In the UK, a pharmacist said his customer base for Viagra was 9% of people in their 20s and 21% in their 30s. A recent US report said these drugs were becoming commonplace in younger men's lives. But many of these guys are popping it after a night of drinking, when failure to lift off is pretty normal anyway. And if you're taking illicit drugs that mess with your blood pressure, which, let's face it, most of them are, you should definitely steer clear of Viagra and Cialis. So, a lot of these men don't actually need these drugs, but take them on nights out when they're partying or just because they want to impress someone. The medical community gives this a big thumbs down. Natural is always better. That said, reports do suggest that ED, the consistent and sober kind, is increasingly hitting guys under 40. This might be due to higher rates of depression or anxiety and the fact that so many young bucks grew up on a diet of hardcore pornography. But right now, we don't fully understand it. Our advice is this: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Viagra versus Cialis. Which do you think comes out on top? Share your thoughts below. Now you need to watch How an Erection Works, or have a look at How Big is the Average Penis, and other male questions answered.